So my first round of questioning, right from my left, and then I will come back. It's a 1 minute of introductory remark from all the speakers, and then we will have two rounds on the exact scenario of chemical logistics, digitization in chemical logistics, and the third is the way forward, and then we will open it up for Q&A. If that's okay with all of you, let me have the privilege to start the session.
Okay.
So my first is, how do you see the digitization in chemical logistics presently? So our first speaker is Mr. Nisarg Pandya, founder and CEO, drivebuddyAI.
Yeah, so basically, digitization is something, what we talk about, GPS tracking, everything which has started a decade ago, which started with the telematics industry in terms of specific logistics part if I talk about. So GPS tracking is now old school technology. Now the world has, and the world of technology has gone way beyond in terms of vehicle monitoring and driver monitoring, and technically autonomous vehicles are also kind of there in the world, which we all see. So now if we think about the bridge, how do we reach there? Because currently we are at somewhere where we are using GPS, we are using engine diagnostics, we are using some sort of driver monitoring systems, but we are yet to reach to the level where autonomy will come into the picture eventually, which is also very, very complex in terms of current scenario of Indian ecosystem. So if we want to reach there, first of all, we have to understand what are the challenges which are there in the road in terms of logistics, in terms of driver behavior, and in terms of overall visibility and a transparency of all the data points what we gather from the road, from the truck, from the vehicle. So a lot of sensors are required in terms of chemical logistics because of hazardous nature of the specific chemical. It requires more attention towards overall monitoring system, which can prevent a lot of hazardous or a lot of accidents or any kind of mishap. So in that case, digitization can start from collecting and monitoring all the data points which are related not only from logistic perspective, from using all the sensors whatever are available from the chemical monitoring, the temperature, whatever is required for the transportation, as well as the vehicle specific data which is related to tire pressure monitoring, or be it from the vehicle tilting behavior. So all such behaviors can happen on the road, and with the sensors, once the system is established, once the technology is available on the vehicle, the representation of that data and interpretation of that data in terms of information can be utilized to make real-time decisions which can prevent a lot of accidents. So this is, I think can be a very good start point. A lot of the technologies are already there, but we are yet to reach to the level where we can actually interpret the data which is coming from the field in real time and start making decisions on top of it, which we call as a data-driven decision making. So that I see is kind of a more towards the future of digitization, where we can prevent a lot of potential mishaps.
Rino sir, your views, introductory remarks.
Good afternoon. I've been with the chemical industry focusing on digitization for the last 4 or 5 years. And one part I would like to say is that there are other industries which are a little bit more advanced.
Sir, if you can.
There are other industries which are a little bit more advanced in terms of adoption of these practices. That said, the importance of digitization to chemical industry, specifically if you look at the parts that Tata Chemicals is into, which involves inorganic chemicals largely, both basic as well as specialty, we are finding that there are a lot of areas where optimization can be done better, visibility can be brought in at a much larger scale, having more predictability, reliability of the supply chains can be established. And all of this was sort of underlined much more during the few years of COVID that we had, when there was a lot more disruption and anxiety, especially with our customers, in terms of how delivery would be. And when I speak to my colleagues in supply chain, there are a lot of factors that they look at. And depending on whether it is basic or specialty, some of these factors have different priorities. But having the right product, right quantity, right time, right quality, right price, and now increasingly the focus is also in terms of safety, ESG, and other parameters. So when you look at all of these, a large amount of these, at least from the exercises that we have done in terms of institutionalizing some of the better digital practices, in terms of some of the pilots that we have tried, I would say that largely I see these fall into three buckets. One is bringing in larger amount of visibility, and these have been in pockets, I would say. It's not necessarily that we have end-to-end visibility established in any of the businesses that we have. But that said, the visibility in each of these pockets have become better and better. There is increasing connectivity, and when I say connectivity, it means also connectivity between these pockets as well as extended stakeholders, including the logistics partners, the suppliers, the customers. And in that sense, logistics is one area where it's not just about you, it's also about how others are planning and shipping to you, how well you are able to anticipate your own requirements and plan also for delivery to your customer. So in that sense, integration also becomes important. So one part is this visibility and integration. Second part, I would say, is planning, where a large amount of tools are there. We have started trying some. I wouldn't say that we have established a large amount there. And there are very interesting challenges there in terms of recommendations and people's judgment versus what software recommends and how much people are willing to trust it, which leads us to the third bucket, which is fundamentally about automation, where I think we are very far away still. Whereas in some of the earlier industries, like in FMCG, retail, automotive, I've seen a large amount of it. People are more amenable to automation, and some parts have been already automated. And I see a lot of advantages in going through these steps, starting from visibility, generating data, all the way up to automation, which requires excellent data, a good amount of clarity on what you want to do, and more rigidity of processes so that disruptions, exceptions, etc. can be minimized. It's an interesting journey. New solutions, new ecosystem partners are coming up, and I think there is increasing acceptability, both because of what other industries are doing, what customers are expecting, and even people like what Amazon is doing or other people are doing is setting expectations that when a customer, even if it's a B2B customer, is giving an order, he wants to be able to have good visibility over the next few days, weeks, months, how his schedules are going to come up. If last minute he wants to make changes, how it will be done, early warning of disruptions, all of that. And I think in that sense, this is an area where digitization will just continue to grow.
Mr. Mahesh, Khetan.
So I feel that as far as the status of digitization in chemical logistics industry is concerned, there are two extremes. One extreme is some small and medium scale enterprises who are at the infancy stage of digitization in logistics, or who haven't started at all. I mean, they don't even have vehicle tracking system or GPS. And then there is another extreme, large organizations who have incorporated digitization in logistics, in chemicals as a part of their strategy. And they have kind of budget up to 5% of their sales revenue in terms of digitization. So these are the two extremes. Again, there are two extremes in the organizations who are very keen to do digitization and who are spending too much on the digitization. In that, there are organizations, 90% of those large organizations who spend heavily on the digitization, spend it on operations, in tracking, visibility, traceability. But very little initiatives are taken on decision making. So how digitization can help strategic decisions, decision making. Say we have seen so much disruption in global logistics happening in last couple of years. And that has actually opened up many windows in terms of opportunities for digitization. The Suez Canal blockage has made people think alternate routes, multimodal routes. Now, some organization brought some cargo from Finland to India by rail. It was a combination of rail and ocean with very little portion of ocean in that. So they reduce the lead time and cost by half. So this kind of initiatives normally are taken when the need happens, but if it can happen on a continuous basis and the digitization, the data, big data, data analytics, import-export data of various countries can throw these kind of opportunities, then that is where the decision-making part, which I think is missing even with the large organizations.
Mr. Vivek Gadre.
Yeah, good afternoon. So, like Mr. Khetan said, forget about the MSME units, but most of the large units have reasonable systems in place which take care of their internal systems. So, for example, there is a good deal of, seamless communication through systems between, let's say, planning, production, marketing, warehousing, and so on. Companies also have used digitization in their procurement, in their negotiations. So for example, if I'm doing a negotiation with a supplier, there are digital tools which will bring down the cost. But I think we need to go much beyond that. For example, today if I negotiate a discount of, let's say, 2%, 5%, whatever on my freight, now it's a zero-sum game. I mean, I have gained 2% discount, but my supplier or the transporter has lost that 2%. Now this is not sustainable, because one, there's a limit to how much you can pull down a supplier. Second is then the supplier will start compromising on the quality or on the service. And third, which we all seen during this pandemic times, before this pandemic, the ocean freights were really at a level where all the shipping companies were losing a lot of money. When they got their opportunity, then they kind of jacked up their rates so much that all the user industries and the chemical industry got into a mess. So my thinking is that the next level should be focus should not be on price, but should be on the cost. For example, I'll give a very simple example. I'll not take too much of your time. In India, 35% of the trucks move empty. Now, that's a huge, wastage of money, and it benefits no one. It does not benefit the transporter. It does not benefit the user. Against that, in Europe and US, it is about 20%. Now, if there's a portal, the digitization role comes over here. If there's a matching between the demand and the supply, then the empty running of the trucks can get reduced. Okay, there'll be a significant cost saving. Now, how to share it between the transporter and the user or the shipper, it's a matter of discussion. But I think that's the way digitization has to proceed further. We should look beyond the boundaries of our companies and go to a much, industry-wide platforms, taking into account the safety, sustainability, and so on.
I'm just reversing the order, and I would ask Vivek ji if you can talk about your company plans on digitization and chemical logistics, so that the stakeholders can work together and provide you a better solution. And the same question would be applicable for all the speakers.
Yeah, sure. So like I said, finally, what are we all working for? We are working to make our logistics or the supply chain more responsive. That is, we want to cut the timelines. We want to cut down the cost. And last but not the least, we want to do it in a safe and sustainable manner. I mean, safety and sustainability is critical for any industry today, but more so for chemical industry, which handles hazardous products, dangerous goods. And also our reputation, is not amongst the best. We could do a lot better with, the public image. So what I would say is that the processes within the company, let's say it is within, let's say Atul or any individual company, what we really should be looking for is having some kind of platforms or partnerships across the value chain. So that's where we need support from some, third parties. Because again, if a chemical company tries to establish such a platform, the competitors would be reluctant to join because of confidentiality issues, data sharing. But if someone comes up with a platform which integrates not only the company's internal systems, but with their customers, with their suppliers, with their final end customers, and the CHAs and the ocean companies and the government departments, I think that is the real way in which digitization has to proceed to the next level. So from company ERP, we have to move to a platform which encompasses the entire ecosystem, and we would be quite keen to look at such platforms if and when they are made available. I'm sure they'll be made available, but we would like to adopt it as soon as possible.
Mahesh ji, your views?
So I have very similar views to of Mr. Gadre. We are also evaluating integrated demand and supply planning solution as a way forward, and we wish to implement that in next 1 year or so. So when I talk about integrated demand and supply planning, of course it involves logistics also. So it starts from forecasting the sales, and which translates into the procurement plan, raw material procurement plan, which then translates into the production plan, which then translates into the logistics plan. So as we have experienced in last couple of years, the vessel availability and schedule reliability has gone for a toss. So when vessel availability is so much of a constraint, definitely you need to plan one month in advance, book the vessel space 1 month in advance. If you have to book the vessel space 1 month in advance, you need to have a concrete plan. And now the days are gone when shipping lines didn't used to charge you if you cancel the booking. Now you have to pay. Only then the booking is permitted, otherwise it's not permitted, particularly for cargoes which are shipped to USA, where the vessel space is extremely constrained. So it's not a luxury now to have an integrated demand and supply planning solution. I believe it's becoming more of a necessity. And again, as I mentioned, that moving from pure digitization of the operational KPIs to decision making or strategic initiatives in the form of digitization, that is where we are moving towards.
Rino, you have an advantage that TCS is there as your group company, and you have been advising them globally for even the chemical vertical. So how are you going to utilize that expertise and see that it is beneficial for Tata Chemicals in the long run, knowing the fact that you have both international as well as India operations, a very big international operations and a very big India operations?
So TCS is a great help as part of the Tata Group, I should say that. In terms of exposure to technologies and what other industries and what other geographies are doing, it is very helpful to have a company like TCS associated with us. That said, I should also say that the problem in India is sometimes very specific. We have tier 2, tier 3 towns, even smaller towns. The truckers are fragmented. You have very unique issues, which are, I wouldn't say unique, but certainly there are a little bit of challenging issues which some of the more developed nations don't have. The other part is, and I think everybody is sort of progressing, whether it is in terms of road network infrastructure or whether in terms of digitization. I think, for example, the government is taking huge strides and planning to do so, and it's very welcome. So, for example, we talked about ocean trade. We tried having complete visibility, starting from digitizing some of the documentation to predicting when we'll have the ships available at the port, and real-time data. And all of this could be made available through separate APIs. So to some extent, the infrastructure is available outside and increasingly inside. So for example, we wanted to try something on optimization between road as well as rail transport. Again, rake availability was also an issue, and we had to factor that in for cost considerations. The problem is there are some basic and bulk chemicals which cannot afford a very large cost on a per truck basis. Whereas if you look at some specialty chemicals, what they can afford is much more, and what we can do in terms of adopting larger and maybe better technology-oriented solutions is there. Part of the issue is linked to what has already been mentioned, that the infrastructure and the assets that we are talking about are actually shared between multiple companies or even industries. So one company taking on the cost of that doesn't make sense. But the other part is that if you are shipping some of the more basic commodities, affordability becomes an issue as to how much is the budget you're willing to spend in terms of either a device or a central infrastructure to get that better visibility. But my own sense is the cost of technology is coming down. As was mentioned, the government is doing its part clearly. Maybe as an industry, we can do more in terms of coming together and organizing more platforms which are of common interest. And perhaps that is one way of addressing some of these issues. I've seen, for example, countries, I will not name one, where you travel one toll gate to another toll gate to another toll gate. At the fourth toll gate, the truck is stopped. and the driver is asked forcibly to take a rest. And that's through visual analytics. The person was identified as the same person who's been driving continuously, and he was given a ticket and he was essentially asked to stop. These are things which are easily possible, and the technology is not that expensive. No one company can do it though.
Nisarg, you have heard everybody, and the name of the company is very good. Drive, Buddy, and the use of technology. So, how do you see their problem as a challenge and try to
basically,
overcome it moving forward?
Yeah, we have been working with many of the chemical transporters since last couple of years in India, and in last 2 years of time we have learned a lot of challenge which they are facing specifically in terms of adopting the digitization and the technology. The first part, it always comes like kind of for whomever company or chemical company they are working with, where their trucks are allocated, are they going to kind of, because it's a cost on them to adapt the technology. They also expect somewhere in terms of reward, that okay, if we are ahead of the others, we should be rewarded a little better in terms of remuneration. So that is the first kind of block. That's where a lot of chemical companies can kind of jump in and adopt this technology on a wider level, on an overall fleet level with all the transporters, where they can, a lot of compliances are coming in also from a lot of chemical companies, as we have seen in other kind of parts of India as well. So that is first part. Second part, in terms of the business ROI, which we talk about for the transporter, specifically in terms of like how many trips or what is the turnaround time for a per trip basis. Like again, what we focus on and what we specifically work is that, how can we improve the turnaround time for any fleet company or any transporter, which ultimately enhances their business, prospect, and then ultimately, help them make more money. So that is where the safety component, which when you are taking hazardous material or any chemical material, the safety is the most important aspect, when the driver has to be skilled enough and trained enough. And for that we have to learn that, kind of which driver is suitable for which kind of conditions of driving, in terms of, for example, a simple example, I would say that with the help of technology, with the help of data, you can easily segregate between the drivers who are better in nighttime driving, because not everyone is suitable for nighttime driving. So with the help of tech, yes, we are able to do it, and we are able to suggest a lot of transporters and a lot of fleet companies that, okay, these are your drivers who are better. So it's basically about risk assessment before the trip starts. So when you start from a loading point, and we are going for unloading point, which will make, maybe probably take 3 days to reach to the specific location, which driver is most suitable? If this driver is kind of taking the vehicle, what is the risk prediction? The AI is saying that how much is the risk for this particular driver, he will meet with an accident in case, based on his historical data. So there are a lot of things which we are also kind of taking using data for making such decisions and helping fleet companies to take such decisions, which will ultimately improve the turnaround time for them. And that's where a lot of restrictions which are created as a part of overall safety, just because there is a lack of technology. But a lot of other, if you see talk about the companies who are in the cargo, not in the chemical but in the non-chemical cargo, they are driving 24 hours, they are driving 21 hours in a day. And that's where when you order something from Amazon, you get on a second day. That's where a huge logistic backend which has been created, and companies are working with their trucks are running. But in chemical there are restrictions of nighttime driving. So the simple point here is that if we adapt technology very well, these restrictions can be removed, and ultimately it can enhance the overall turnaround time for everyone, and which ultimately improves the business aspect for all the stakeholders in the market. So that's where we can definitely play a major role in terms of technology provider for the chemical companies, as well as for the transporters, where the integration can happen, the visibility of data can be shared, and that ultimately enhances overall opportunities for everyone.
Have you written down the questions, or if there are any questions, please write it down, and somebody from our team will collect it. Or is it that you want to speak on a mic? But what happens is that they start talking about stories, and I'm trying to save time. That's the whole purpose of asking you to write down those queries. Please write your name also. So, and the query that you have or the question that you have. So we have another 5 minutes for our speakers, and then we will take the Q&A. So again, I am reversing the order from Nisarg again. In 1 minute, what is the way forward, and if you can give me point-wise answers for digitization in logistics. You should not talk about yourself. You should talk about the chemical companies, and chemical companies will talk about what the solution providers or the platform provider needs to do.
Yeah, so way forward, is pretty much,
Point-wise.
yeah, so the first point is like, kind of collecting as much of data points as possible to make decision making. That is the first part, and that majority of the problem, and it ultimately helps everyone. The second point is that overall business aspect and business visibility for everyone has to increase, and digital and technology can play a major role in that. The third point is like, enhancing overall safety from the driving perspective and from logistic perspective. That is a way forward with the help of technology. This is anyway, if it's compliance, it will come for everyone, and a lot of adoption has already been started without compliance also. So a lot of initiatives, a lot of enthusiastic players are there in the market who are adopting technology just for the sake of proving themselves as a better player compared to other. So adaptation of technology, improvement in overall business aspect, improving safety, which ultimately reduce the losses. This is going to be the way forward with the help of all the digitalization which can happen in the overall industry.
Rino sir, your views?
So I would agree on the data side. I would also put in one additional thing in terms of having a shared platform for certain kinds of data. So for example, if there is a truck plying between Delhi to let us say the port, the question here is the data on that particular traffic, on that truck, or on the road conditions is not something which is unique or important only to one company. The question is how much of that data can we make available so that we can have a more common platform. One, to look at data of the truck itself. Second, also to talk about measures like availability, how much of it is going empty, at what spots can somebody else fill. So questions like these, where it is not about one company's competitiveness or let us say ability to extract some mileage out of it. It is about the whole industry becoming much better and efficient. So the question really here is this data, who has this data, does it take extra effort to collect this data, can you make a platform available to do that? Government, I think, is doing its part. The question really is, as an industry, can we do this better? And it may not necessarily be restricted to chemical industry as such. But if we are able to have a lot more transparency around this, or if somebody has to take the effort and expense to collect this data and organize it, fine, it can be a value proposition by a company. But then somebody has to be really big and be able to offer it as a more comprehensive solution. So I think this would be a game changer in addition to what we can do individually in our own companies.
Mahesh ji, your views?
So my take on way forward is an expectation from the digital service providers is to make digitization affordable. I mean, if we ask for quotations for any strategic initiative like integrated demand supply planning and all, we get quotation in crores. My request is make it in lakhs instead of crores so that everyone can afford it. And I mean, even smaller organizations can afford it. Even our logistics partners can afford it. See, machine learning kind of initiatives work only when there is a quality of data flowing into the system. Otherwise, it is garbage in, garbage out. The quality of data requires data collation from lots of agencies like import-export data of different countries. So it has to be affordable. That's my only take.
Sir, your views, Vivek ji?
Yeah, so basically if we look at the supply chain cost, for 62% of that comes from transportation, 34% comes from inventory. Now that's a huge number, and if we want to control inventory, predicting the demand is the most critical input, because if we cannot predict the demand in a reasonable way, I mean obviously you have to build inventory. Now today, some other sectors like maybe the FMCGs, they are much better at predicting the demand. So maybe our expectation from the service provider is using big data analytics and AI and ML and whatever other technologies available. If they can help us predict the demand in a more, let's say in a more realistic way, that would reduce our cost quite significantly.
I think Vivek ji has given a very good analogy, and he has said that if the chemical industry can move the FMCG way, both in terms of predictability, it becomes easier for everybody, all the stakeholders, to then move accordingly. I have got only one question. If there are no questions or please submit it to the girl. If there are any, please give it to her. She will take it from your desk. And because we have completed on time. Now we have 15 minutes for Q&A. And if do not have too many questions, we will then wrap it up as early as possible so that we can save on time and you can have lunch as early as possible. So the first question is, waking with data or walking with data? Achha, working with data and selection driven on the past data, how will this help to improve the driver behavior or availability of driver is an issue? Will you take it up?
Yeah, can you repeat the question, please?
He's saying that the data that you have, how will this data help in selection of the driver? Just like in Ola and Uber.
So
Ola and Uber, what you do is on the basis of the scoring that you do, that driver gets preference over the other.
So basically what we do is we evaluate the drivers based on their behavior and their responses to whatever assistance has been provided in the vehicle. So first of all, we measure that, okay, are they really following the compliance what has been defined by the fleet company or a chemical company, whatever, So the simple example would be like driving time compliance. As sir said, if the driver, the one person should not drive beyond 6 hours or one person should not drive beyond 4 hours. So that is the first thing, how many times he is actually complying to it. That's the first data point. The second data point is that how he is behaving in all different conditions. So if he is going on a highway, he is going on a certain speed. So what is the distance maintenance he is doing? What is his normal habit when he is driving? Because we have seen a lot of drivers who has one hand on steering, one hand with phone, and and then they are not at all attentive when they are actually driving, and this may end up in some sort of accident and which may have a lot of losses. So considering all these parameters, considering the route, which route you are going on, what is the history of this particular route with some, mishaps in the past, and based on that, what is this driver's responses to all this, specific data point, what has been there, which be it a weather condition, be it a season, be it a daytime driving, nighttime driving, be it a, highway driving or urban driving. Based on all different data points, the evaluation happens of the driver, and for that particular for the evaluation, which is historical, maybe 6 months of data or 1 year of that particular driver data, that's where the AI will be able to give you little more accurate judgment in a way that how this driver will actually go, and how risky or how not risky he is for this particular cargo assignment which has been given. So it takes a good amount of time of data. That's first part, and whatever majority number of data points you can collect and contextualize those data points what has been collected from the device in a different aspect, that can help to give a judgment and predict overall risk.
Thank you, Mr. Pandya. There is a question for Mr. Rino Raj. And this is from Mr. Deepak Narang, Head Logistics, DCM Sriram. His question is ROI on digitalization in logistics. How easy or how quicker you get those?
Yeah, so this is a big challenge as most digital initiatives go. One thing is that we always look at digital as opposed to the infrastructure side from an from an ROI perspective. So this is something that we struggle with on a regular basis. The approach that we do is look at a pilot of some nature, in some sense estimate the ROI out of that and see if it is something that we need to institutionalize at scale. Some cases it is very evident, like the multimodal optimization that we looked at, which is basically, earlier days we would look at basic cost or maybe some basic OR model. Nowadays there is a lot more data and predictability available, so you can do a more fine analysis. The ROI comes up very fast because it's basically a central asset. It's a one-time software and it generates returns every time you use it. In other cases where, let us say, you have to put a device in a vehicle or on the cargo or the container, then suddenly things change considerably. Then you also have to worry whether, as I mentioned, whether it's a basic commodity or is it a specialty chemical which can afford it in its margin. So there is no one answer to it. Only one thing I would say is that we keep trying to do this. Sometimes the way forward is to make sure that the pilot is done and initial infrastructure is based on an ROI positive, let us say, commodity or part of the business, and then that infrastructure can be more easily extended to other parts. Otherwise, some of the infrastructure that we want will never get built if you start on the wrong use cases or pilot on the wrong areas. But once there is a success in a good part of the business, there is a lot more acceptability, and even then, the questions on ROI tend to be slightly weaker when we want to establish it across the company. And overall, I would say that it's not always easy to do this, mainly because there are not too many examples of this being done and case studies out in the open in chemical industry. FMCG and banking and many other areas have a lot more advantage in this manner. Even within TCS, we don't find too many case studies where they can come out and say that in chemical industry this has been done. The B2B nature of the industry, the fact that a large amount of the activity on the logistics side is physical and not yet digitized, are all part of the problem. But that said, ROI, one, we should focus. Second, there are ways of addressing it so that it makes sense. And if we are not able to convince that it makes sense over at least a period of time, we invariably drop the idea, at least for the time being. And there is enough, let us say, ROI positive stuff to do so that it keeps us busy.
Maheshji, it's not directed to you, but I'm asking this from you. There is a question from Mr. Saurav Mishra. Which company, Saurav Mishra? Opel. And the question is, can digitization assist compliances, RTO, PESO, GPCB, HSC, if, and it is affordable also at the same time?
Yeah, so basically blockchain is meant for that. Compliances and in a digital manner, all the regulations, certifications. So if you implement blockchain, then it takes care of the compliance and regulations part as well.
And the other is Mr. Balachandran is talking about how are you tracking digitization reach? On what parameters?
Reach.
So he's saying that, okay, if a company is planning to go for logistics and supply chain digitization, how will you measure? And on what parameters you are going to measure and say, okay. My company is number one,
yeah,
number
so Gartner,
or on a score.
Yeah, Gartner does measure it, and Gartner publishes comparison with a score. So they also Gartner also publishes a report which not only measures the organization based on digitization on a particular scale or a particular score. They also compare it with the say EBITDA or the revenue of the organizations. So, I mean, if you go through that latest Gartner report, you will see, particularly for the chemical industries, you will see some very interesting findings in the Gartner report. So there are organizations which are very high in digitization, but not very high in terms of profitability. And there are organizations who are low on digitization. Sorry if offend some of the digital service providers here, but it's a fact and it's published by Gartner, which is authentic. So there are organizations which are low in digitization but are doing better profit. So some organizations overdo. I mean, digitization cannot be for just the sake of it. If you do digitization in a controlled manner, what you need, then it certainly helps. And ROI, I would say don't measure ROI on digitization. See, there are things which are good to have and there are things which are must to have. In the past, digitization was good to have. I think today it is must to have. I mean, with so much mobile phones and so much technology is coming.
Thank you, sir. Now to Mr. Vivek Gadre. There are two questions from Sandeep. Sandeep from where? Opel. That's the reason you have used both sides of the paper. Thank you, sir, for saving paper. Can vehicle tracking system to have some common software platform and user interface? So he's talking about vehicle tracking system to have a common platform so that and a user interface so that everybody can use. And even the government of India is also talking about in some form or the other. And can we use mobile phones for vehicle tracking system?
Yeah, of course, I think there are technologies available which does not require a separate device. There are a number of service providers who would track the mobile number of the driver and locate your vehicle and also see how many places it has stopped and what route it has taken and so on. Now, obviously, I mean, you have a tracking system, but as was said by, I think it was one of the earlier speakers, I forget his name, that you need to use it properly. I think it was Mr. Raj who said it, that just having a tracking system does not help. So you need to actively, watch for it and take real-time actions. And currently, yes, I think what is happening is that in my experience, a transporter is tracking all his vehicles and making sure things are okay. Similarly, if I am transporting goods in a particular truck, I am tracking that. I really do not know if any government agency or some third party is tracking all the vehicles and trying to see whether they are driving it in a safe manner or not.
Thank you, sir.